Hello and welcome everyone to session 7 of the Massive Open Online course for the Master's Degree in Digital Currencies for the University of Nicosia. This is Andreas Antonopoulos, and I'll be answering your questions for this session on alternative uses of the blockchain, as well as alternative cryptocurrencies and chains. I'll also be answering any questions you may have from the previous sessions, as this is my last session for this iteration of our MOOC, and of course I'll also be answering any questions you may have on the live chat. So please jump in with your questions anytime, and let's get right to it. First question today comes from Nicola. Exchange between coins is possible with fixed pegged exchange rates on sidechains. However, how do we determine the value of other coins? For instance, we want to lock one Bitcoin and through sidechain exchange it how much of XYZ coin, some other coin. So Nicola, the way a sidechain would work is that effectively you have an owner of coins on one chain and an owner of coins on another chain. And the exchange is basically an agreement between these two owners of coins to exchange in a market. So the same way you determine the exchange rate in an open market through bid and ask through order books, where one person says, this is how much I want for my Bitcoin, and another person says, well, this is how much Bitcoin I'll give you for your Ethereum or whatever. And based on the relative spread of those two, if you find a match, then you have a potential exchange. The only difference is that rather than doing the exchange through a third-party custodian, you do the exchange through a two-way peg on a sidechain. So the coins are locked up on one chain and released on the other. And that's, as far as I understand it, the mechanism through which you establish the exchange rate for sidechains. Claude asks, considering the new European Union General Data Protection Regulation that was adopted in April 2016 and will be enforced in May 2018, focusing on individual privacy, do you believe that altcoins such as Monero are likely to be favored in Europe while other altcoins being favored elsewhere? Claude, no, because politicians suffer from extreme hypocrisy, and as a result, at the same time that they are passing the General Protection Regulation in April 2016, we're seeing now that the European Parliament is proposing that all forms of anonymous currencies should be banned within Europe, and they're passing directives for digital currencies, recommendations to the European Commission to put in place regulations in all member states in order to discourage or ban the use of cryptocurrencies that are anonymous, as they call them. Of course, there's no definition of what anonymous is, no definition of how anonymous gets you banned, and no understanding of what banned means, other than no official exchanges will exist, presumably. But of course, the cryptocurrencies don't go away. So within the European Union, there is a conflict between the general privacy regulations, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the banking regulations and oversight regulations by the European Commission that directly contradict each other. Gustavo asks, hi Andreas, how does NEM use harvesting and proof of importance instead of normal mining? Is proof of importance a hybrid between proof of stake and proof of resource? And Gustavo provides a reference from the NEM coin website that says, proof of importance is the name of the blockchain consensus algorithm used by NEM. Each account is assigned an importance score that proxies its aggregate importance to the NEM economy. Accounts with higher importance scores have higher probabilities of harvesting a block. Because all transactions are publicly available, the transaction graph of the NEM economy can be calculated exactly. The topology of the transaction graph can be used as an input into the importance of an account. The insight that the transaction graph can be used for elucidating the importance of an account is the key innovation of proof of importance. Well, from what I understand, and I honestly don't understand the NEM proof of importance very well. From what I understand, it is a modified proof of stake system. So it's a proof of stake system that assigns value not just based on the amount of coins that you have locked in an account, but the connectivity between your coins and, through transactions, the other participants in the economy. So it's kind of like a weighted proof of stake. That's my understanding of it. But I'm honestly don't understand it well enough to really comment further. Roland asks, I want to dig deeper into how secure proof of work and proof of stake really are. I'll start with proof of work, then move on to proof of stake. I tend to agree with Peter Todd that governments will find a way to regulate ASIC chips, either the production or the users, as long as chip production is centralized. How do you think this will evolve moving forward? Will ASIC production become more distributed in the future? So looking at that as a vulnerability of proof of work is an interesting point. If ASIC chips become regulated, one of the things to consider is that the existing amount of hashing power for Bitcoin is certainly enough to provide security against well-equipped attackers, well-funded attackers. So then the question becomes, if ASIC chips are regulated or suppressed, or the usage of ASIC chips is regulated, then presumably the existing ASIC chips that are currently used on the network will be the predominant ASIC chips that exist, and production of new chips will be difficult or will not happen in certain countries. I would guess that that would actually make chip production less centralized if the centralized locations are effectively regulated. But it's difficult to say how this will evolve and whether ASIC production will become more distributed in the future. My gut feeling is that the greatest impacts on ASIC production is Moore's law, meaning that the very, very large improvements in ASIC performance that were experienced during the first 7 years of Bitcoin involved catching up to the front end of Moore's law and increasing the resolution of the chips all the way down to 16 nanometers. From that point on, the improvements cannot be as radical as they were before. So every year in the past, we've seen improvements of 100x or even 1000x in the performance of ASICs as they scale down to reach the limits of semiconductor manufacturing. Once they reach Moore's law, then the improvements are now bound by a 2x improvement a year or every 18 months. And that is significantly slower. That means that where ASICs previously had a shelf life that was measured in months, usually less than 6 months, now ASICs coming out, for example, the 16 nanometer ASICs that we're seeing are likely to be profitable to use for up to 2 years. And I think that changes the economics of distribution as well as the distribution of the economics, and may re-decentralize mining by making it more possible for companies to produce mining at a competitive rate without having necessarily the same access to semiconductor fabrication that the current ASIC producers have. So I think one of the promising developments is the entry into this market of large semiconductor companies like Qualcomm, which is partnered with one of the mining companies, 21.co, to produce ASICs. So we'll see how it goes. I think that might be an interesting way to see consumer level ASICs. I don't think that this issue of regulated ASIC chips, at least for now, is a significant disadvantage for proof of work. I don't see that as spelling the end of proof of work or the doom of proof of work. So let's look at proof of stake. You say, Roland says, with proof of stake, there is no hash puzzle. That means that the validator whose turn it is to sign a block can easily create multiple blocks and thus forks to try to double spend coins. Also, there's no objective way to determine which chain is the real chain, right? Well, not really. The validator cannot sign and create multiple blocks and double spend coins. So there are various proof of stake proposals out there, and there are a few proof of stake and hybrid proof of stake systems, delegated proof of stake and hybrid proof of stake systems that are in production today. They're fairly limited in scale, but I do not believe that they can so easily be attacked so that someone can sign multiple blocks just because they have stake. However, the second part of your claim, there is no objective way to determine which chain is the real chain. This is true in terms of someone arriving into the network or joining the network at a later date and not being able to discern the difference between a real chain and not the real chain. So one of the benefits of proof of work is that it allows an observer to join the network late and yet be able to see from the proof of work itself which is the real chain that has the longest cumulative difficulty. So proof of stake and proof of work, I guess, both have different types of weaknesses, and that's why we're seeing in many cases hybrid solutions that use both. I think we're going to realize gradually that a second layer solution such as Lightning Network or another payment channel based solution in Bitcoin effectively becomes a type of proof of stake system. Now, the reason for that is because when running a Lightning node, you are validating transactions by the consensus rules. In order to validate transactions, you have to have payments locked up in channels. And if you are routing payments through those channels, you earn fees. So you have stake, you are doing validation, and based on the stake and validation, you earn fees. That sounds like a proof of stake system to me. It also provides funding for nodes to run fully validating nodes. So it has some of the elements we see in the Dash masternode model to provide funding. So Bitcoin is getting something that looks suspiciously like proof of stake. Also, many of the proof of stake systems that are being proposed may end up checkpointing their blocks into a proof of work chain such as Bitcoin in order to preserve immutability and get the best of both worlds. There may be only one proof of work chain that's needed to support many different chains that are using just proof of stake with checkpointing. But we'll see. This is still a developing environment. Roberto asks, I recently found this tweet about Bitcoin and I do not understand how to interpret it. Could someone help explain, please? Bitcoin Core Roadmap. Sorry, this is the tweet. Quote, Bitcoin Core Roadmap. Schnorr signatures to replace ECDSA. This will decrease blockchain data by 25%. What are Schnorr signatures? Are those the same as Zcashes? And do Schnorr signatures carry less data than ECDSA? Can the impact also spread to wallets in the way they use ECDSA as well to create private public keys? So Roberto, Schnorr signatures are a type of signature invented by a scientist whose last name is Schnorr. And Schnorr signatures allow you to do aggregation, which is a unique feature. They're slightly more compact than ECDSA, I believe. They're computationally faster, and they're also not malleable. They solve some of the malleability issues with ECDSA. Overall, many of the developers who work on Bitcoin consider them a very good fit for Bitcoin's purposes. So if you think of a Bitcoin transaction, one of the elements that causes the use of a lot of space on the blockchain is the fact that every input in a transaction is independently signed. So let's say you have a transaction that has 4 inputs and 2 outputs. just because you had a lot of loose coins around. So you aggregate your UTXOs, you source 4 inputs, and then you make a payment to someone, and then maybe you have a change output as well. With those 4 inputs, you're going to have 4 signatures, 4 ECDSA signatures today. And those signatures are going to be, some 200 bytes in total. And as a result, they're each of them. And as a result, that's going to add significant size to your transaction. Now, with Schnorr signatures, what you could do is you could have essentially signature aggregation, where it's almost like adding up all of the signatures and producing one signature that corresponds to the sum of all of the other signatures. So you would have 4 inputs, and instead of 4 distinct signatures, you could have one signature that covers all 4 inputs. That kind of incremental signing means that the Schnorr signatures on a transaction with 4 inputs would consume 25% of the space that you would have for 4 signatures. 1 signature for Schnorr, 4 signatures for ECDSA, quite a bit of space saving. That's one case. The other case, even more so, is when some of those inputs are from multi-signature addresses. If you have a multi-signature script, or some part of your script contains a multi-signature script component within it, then the signatures you apply to that today are ECDSA signatures. And in a multi-signature script, let's say you have a 2 of 3, that means you're going to have 2 ECDSA signatures for that multi-signature script. If you have 4 inputs that are multi-signature, then you're looking at 8 signatures for 2 of 3 with 4 specific inputs. If you had a 3 of 5 or a 4 of 6 type signature scheme, now you can imagine how quickly these escalate. If you had a 4 of 6 and you had 4 inputs of the 4 of 6 type, then you're looking at 16 different signatures. And so you can not only aggregate the multi-signatures themselves, so the signatures from 4 different participants can be aggregated so you have just one, but you can also aggregate the signature from all of the inputs. And again, that kind of aggregation can significantly reduce the amount of space you consume in a transaction. In order for Schnorr signatures to be applied, you need the ability to update the scripting language in Bitcoin, which would be a soft fork. And there's 2 ways of doing that. One is to do a soft fork that replaces an existing script operand. But more likely, we'll see this as an update onto segregated witness as a different witness type, using the segregated witness capability to upgrade scripts. Alex asks, Dear Andreas, I have a couple of questions in regards to Ethereum smart contracts. Is it correct to assume that a new coin on Ethereum is a private case of a smart contract? Yes, essentially, each new coin, and I believe the standard is called ERC20, is a smart contract that manages a token, and those tokens are essentially a smart contract. And the second question from Alex is, can we calculate the cost of launching a coin on Ethereum? Once the coin is launched, does it require additional gas to be spent from the coin issuer, or is there only a per transaction fee? Each transaction provides the gas that is required by the smart contract to cover the coin. So as far as I understand it, and I'm not entirely sure about that, the coin issuer does not need to spend additional gas because each transaction would provide that gas. Roland asks, considering the fact that the Ethereum blockchain is very hard to scale in a decentralized way due to the high amount of data needed for smart contracts, wouldn't it be better to keep most of the Ethereum smart contracts off-chain, just like you have in a multi-sig balance between 2 parties in the Lightning Network or a payment channel for Bitcoin? Roland, yes, it would be better to move these things to an off-chain second layer in order to reduce the cost. Not sure exactly how you would do that, however, and whether you can turn a smart contract into a second layer type of payment channel or channel contract or contract channel or something like that. Haven't seen much work in that space. I know that you certainly can use Lightning Network to do payment channels on top of Ethereum, but that's for payments, not for the smart contracts themselves. And generally speaking, if you look at the Ethereum development scene, the proposed solutions for Ethereum scaling mostly revolve around a technology or a technique called sharding, which involves having different subsets of the blockchain and the corresponding smart contracts and the state tree that is kept in the blockchain held by different subsets of the network. So essentially, you break up the data into shards, and different nodes are responsible for keeping copies of just specific shards rather than the entire blockchain. And that's one way that's being proposed to help the Ethereum blockchain scale in a decentralized way. Todd asks, it's been 2 years and still no answer to the scaling debate. Should governance be a key performance indicator when assessing altcoins? What is your opinion of the function and incentives for masternode owners in Dash? Todd, it's been 2 years and yet we do have answers to the scaling debate. What we don't have is agreement from everyone as to the best way to proceed in a decentralized fashion. And so Bitcoin's governance model, which works through the consensus algorithm, ensures that if there is no overwhelming consensus to modify the system, then the status quo persists. This is a feature. It basically creates a system that is highly resistant to change when that change doesn't have sufficient consensus. The reason we don't have an option to move forward in the scaling debate is because there is no overwhelming consensus on how to move forward from everyone who participates in Bitcoin. No one can impose their vision. So if by governance you mean a lesser threshold for majority voting, and I don't know what the thresholds are for masternode owners in Dash, but I do know that they involve effectively a delegated proof of stake system, or that's how I understand it. Then what we're talking about is lowering the threshold so that a smaller than 95% majority can implement changes to the protocol. That will certainly resolve the scaling debate. But resolving the scaling debate is not necessarily the best approach, because if the scaling debate is resolved by weakening the decentralization characteristics or the control characteristics or the robustness of the consensus algorithm or the ability of the system to resist attacks, then resolving the scaling debate may fatally damage the resilience of the system. And of course, the big difference between Dash and Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is large enough and has enough liquidity and enough of a target that it attracts massive attacks. Now, at some point, if Dash gets big enough, it will also attack. It will also attract attacks, and it will also attract scaling issues, and it will also attract governance debates. And if those debates are resolved on a lower majority threshold, that may, in fact, make the system less resilient to a takeover attack by a determined but small majority. So that's not perhaps the ideal situation. These systems are not designed to operate when things are going well. They're designed to operate under extreme adversarial conditions. And I think what we're seeing is that we're at the beginning of extreme adversarial conditions, and there are significant attempts to attack Bitcoin from a variety of different actors, both social attacks and technological attacks, and Bitcoin is resisting those attacks. Whether Bitcoin has a better solution to resisting those attacks than Dash, or whether Dash has a better solution, we don't know. But at the moment, you certainly can't compare them because the scale at which Bitcoin is operating is completely different than the scale at which Dash is operating. when Bitcoin was at the same scale that Dash is today, there were no fees on transactions. There was no scaling debate. There was no governance problems. And everything worked very, very nicely. But it's when you get to the greater scale that new challenges are ahead, and we'll see how Bitcoin overcomes them. And I hope Dash also grows and provides alternative approaches to doing the same, solving the same problems. And if it faces some of the same problems that Bitcoin has faced, maybe it shows a better way forward. We'll see. But it hasn't faced those problems yet. Svetlana asks, hello, Andreas. Could you please give a more simplified explanation of ring signatures? I don't know if I can. Let me try. Ring signatures are a form of group signature. That means that in a ring signature, there are a number of participants who form a group, and they have essentially a number of keys that are related to each other in such a way that they form a ring. They form a group together. And when a signature is applied by one of the keys in the group, it is not possible to determine who signed. So by making group signatures a capability within a blockchain, what that allows senders to do is protect their privacy by making it difficult to see who has signed a transaction, because the signatures cannot be linked through a specific key, but instead they can only be linked to a group of keys. And there's various theories as to how you organize the groups and what the overlap between groups is and things like that. As far as I understand it, one of the systems that uses ring signatures, if I understand it correctly, is Monero. And Monero uses ring signatures to protect the privacy of senders. So there are a number of privacy technologies that protect different parts of the transaction. Ring signatures protect the identity of senders because they allow them to essentially mask their signatures and make them indistinguishable from the signatures of anybody in the group. Stealth addresses, on the other hand, protect the identity of recipients because stealth addresses allow you to obfuscate the destination. Coin join or coin mixing can thwart or prevent analytics, which operate on both senders and recipients. And finally, various forms of confidential transactions or value encryption may protect the value of the transaction by encrypting the amounts. So you can think of these as complementary technologies. Some blockchains have protections for senders, some have protections for recipients, some have remixers, and some have value encryption, and some have all of the above. In the case of, for example, Zero Cash, it uses a combination of techniques to protect the identity of senders and recipients and the value that's being exchanged through zero-knowledge snarks. In the case of Monero, for example, it uses ring signatures to protect the senders, and I believe it uses remixing to protect the recipients, but the values can be seen. And Dash uses remixing to protect both senders and recipients. Bitcoin can use remixing through CoinJoin and CoinSwap, JoinMarket, TumbleBit, and other proposed technologies. There's also a proposal for doing value encryption called confidential transactions, which has not been implemented yet on the main net, but could be one of the possible upgrades to Bitcoin after we see SegWit being implemented. And by combining several of these techniques, we could massively increase the privacy of Bitcoin transactions. I hope that answers your question. I hope that gave a good explanation of ring signatures. Let's see if we have any questions on the chat. And are there any questions in the channel? Let me quickly check. That is all we had for this particular MOOC at this time. And there are no further questions. So we're going to finish this one a bit early. It's been my pleasure teaching the 7th iteration of the MOOC, and this is the final session. Enjoy the rest of your studies. Keep up with the great questions. Good luck for everyone taking the final exam, of course, and even more good luck for those who decide to continue their master's degree studies. Hope you have a happy graduation, and I will see perhaps some of you or some new students in the next iteration of the MOOC coming this summer. Take care, everyone.